Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike, and I am the host of the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, we do this every Wednesday afternoon, starting at 12:05 Mountain Time, 2:05 Eastern. And if you want to grow yourself, if you want to move to the next level, if you want to learn things from people that are in the trenches and have done it, this is the show for you. It's going to allow you to grow your own leadership and in turn allows you to spread that love, spread that energy, and grow the people that are around you in your both business and personal life. So I'm very excited. As you know, we bring on a guest each week, and I have some very collaborative, organic conversations with people from different verticals of business. I have an absolutely phenomenal guest today. His name is Walt McKinley. He's got 20 years as a Navy intelligence officer, 5 years in corporate America, and since has been teaching and training leadership and heart-driven leadership. I mean, there's just so much to go on about. I'm going to bring him on the show right now, if I can find the right button. And Walt, welcome to the Leadership Toolkit, man. Thanks for joining with me today.
Mike, what's going on, brother? Hey, I got to tell you that intro, I was fired up. I was ready to make my desk stand up and really get into this one today. I appreciate you having me on. Such a blessing. And I just love that you continue to lead from the front and creating the leadership toolbox. Just critical. And the need is critical for where our society is at right now. And the need for strong leadership is really important.
Absolutely. Well, if you would do me a favor and just take a couple of minutes, maybe introduce yourself, give a little bit more depth to your leadership background for our audience here, and then I'd love to get into just having a conversation with you, man.
Perfect, brother. Yeah. So I spent 20 years in the military, like you talked about. I spent 10 on the enlisted side, had some phenomenal leaders that not only helped shape me as a leader, but also just helped kind of usher me into manhood and shape me as a man. And I spent 20 years there. After 10 years, I jumped to the officer side as all my enlisted buddies. They said I went to the dark side. And I jumped to the officer side of that and just had an amazing finish to my career doing what I finished at was human intelligence stuff, kind of spy game stuff, which was a lot of fun and a huge challenge in managing global operations and coordinating with CIA and FBI. And it was just really cool to do and a really neat way to finish off my career. But the cool thing about the military, and why I talk about boots, and I'll talk about my boardroom experience here in a minute. The really neat thing about the military is I had leaders that literally taught me what not to do. I had leaders that taught me what to do. I'm like a microcosm of maybe 5 different leaders that I had that were just phenomenal human beings that really showed me what it meant to be a leader that I took into corporate America after I finished my career and had a lot of success. I mean, I was promoted 4 times in the first 5 years. I worked for 2 different companies, a privately owned company initially, and then I worked for a Fortune 300 company afterwards in executive roles. And my last role, I managed a team of almost 500 and in multiple sites around the world, Philippines, India, and 5 sites around the US. And so it was really fun. It was a huge challenge. Like, how do you drive engagement across multiple locations around the world in different time zones? And then also COVID happened in the middle of that. And when COVID happened in the middle of that, we all went to work from home when we were all in offices. And so the challenges of how to really drive engagement changed. And it was a really cool challenge, although it also led to me being burnt out because I didn't do the self-care. And if you don't like the word self-care, call it maintenance. I didn't do those things that I needed to do to really keep myself fresh and do those things that I was having everybody else do. I just felt like as a leader, I needed to, Superman and run through all the fires and keep making it happen. But 12 to 15-hour days, back-to-back Zoom calls and strategic leadership meetings, trying to make time for my leaders that I was responsible for, trying to be a dad, trying to be a husband, trying to find time for myself. I just didn't balance that very well. And I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about that because it's a huge part of my story now. And it led me to leave corporate America and change what I was doing to something I was way more passionate about. And thank God I have an amazing wife who allowed and supported and really pushed me to leave corporate America and write my memoir she had been begging me to do for 10 years. We've been married 24 years together, 26. She knows I had wanted to be a professional speaker for my entire life. And she said, if not now, when? and she supported my career. So we left a huge amount of income on the table to chase this passion of really helping not only still be able to develop high performing leadership teams and team first winning environments in corporate America, as I still do some consulting, but really just to help people be the best version of themselves. And now with legacy driven marriages, the workshops, the book we're coming out with, our top 5% global podcast, to be able to really help people to create powerful marriages. So not only do them and their immediate family find the success, but they really create generational legacies that transcend far beyond anything that they could even imagine at this point because of the work they're willing to do now. So there's a lot there. I've lived multiple lives in one. That's not even counting my childhood stuff. And, but really, I thrive in service. I thrive in helping people. I'm an advisor by nature, and it's what really brings me the most joy. So doing what I'm doing now has actually brought me joy I didn't even know I missed out on, bro. It
That's
has been the
unbelievable.
number one biggest factor to leading me to be the best husband, father, and version of myself for those people around me that need me, and helping create other people that where they can go share their stories and they can go help the people that need to hear their voice, that don't need to hear my story, they need to hear their story, and creating those other warriors that are going to be out there in the arena of life fighting to make this world a better place.
Dude, that is such just there's so much there. And like we we were talking beforehand. We said, "Hey, let's keep it a 45-minute, hour-long podcast. We could have like an afternoon masterclass and sit and go through this, dude." There's just so much great wisdom that you're bringing to the table. And so I'd be remiss before we get started, just in case, because once we start jamming, sometimes I will forget the simple things. And one of the things you brought up is, and said several times, you said, "Hey, I have an awesome and supportive wife." And we were talking beforehand, as do I. And one of the things that you and your wife do is you have this, the Legacy Driven Marriages podcast. And that is available. I'm going to give the plug for you right now. It's available on just about every podcast platform. So if you are listening to this, you in a leadership role, you in a relationship, you that's married or thinking about getting married, in any of those, all the above, then make sure and check out Walt and his wife's podcast. What's your wife's name? Forgive me.
Stephanie.
Stephanie. So Walt and Stephanie, check out their podcast, Legacy Driven Marriages. It's on every podcast platform. I'll make sure and leave a link to that in the show notes as well. And I think that is really awesome, because one of the first things that leadership truly is you have to be able to lead yourself. You have to be able to, you said this, effectively lead your family, your spouse, your kids, and then certainly into business, into corporate America, into the military. And you mentioned something at the beginning, is it can get exhausting, because we're supposed to have this armor, right? We're supposed to, well, Walt, he's a leader. And so I'm just going to turn to him for everything. And he's got all the answers. And it's tough because we don't always have all the answers, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the collaborative effect and the synergy you create when developing high performing teams that gives you the answer. The leader definitely does not have all the answers. And I knew that I didn't. So I'm great at delegating. I'm great at empowering people to be solution oriented in order to maximize the output of whatever it's going to be, right? But you build amazing cultures by empowering people and giving them some autonomy to make some decisions, and more importantly, giving them the green light to go ahead and figure out what processes need to be tweaked or improved. That's no different than in your marriage. And what I've found in life, the people that have the strongest marriages typically are going to be the best leaders. The people that have the strongest relationships are going to be the best leaders. The people who've worked through their traumatic experiences in life, where they've learned to respond to their triggers versus react to the triggers, those are going to be the strongest leaders. So what I feel like is leadership really starts, you said it, within yourself. Number one, you got to be good with who you are. And secondly, it starts at home. And when you have that, and that is on point, and you've really focused on leading from your home first, the things you can do when you move into your roles in corporate America or whatever job you have will be
Sure.
profoundly different than if you're avoiding home and you're working extra hours. If all you do is dive into work and you don't do the self-care things that recharge your batteries, if all you're doing is just driving KPIs and metrics and results, and you're running your people into the ground because, hey, you don't care, you don't really want to go home because things are a mess there. It's
Sure.
it's such a change in mentality, because outwardly, what society looks at for success is what, especially men, but what's your position? What's your role? How much money do you make? What kind of car do you drive? What kind of house do you have? And I feel like there's such a big miss in what we're prioritizing as a society. And by the way, I've done it myself, where
Well, I
I
think we
just,
all have. Men
right,
chase that.
and you're just working and you're chasing the promo, and you know it's going to come at some point. You're doing all the extra stuff, and meanwhile other parts of your life are really struggling. The reality is, nobody, if somebody goes to your funeral one day and talks about you being a vice president or president of a company, or you doing all these amazing things from a work perspective, man, like, you've really missed the point of life. And in the regrets of the dying book, the people that they interviewed on their deathbed, they didn't talk
Mhm.
about, they said they wish they spent more time with family. They wish that they took some of the money that they made and had experiences for themselves and with their kids and with their spouse. Those are the things that are really going to matter. And when we prioritize those things, what we got to change the mentality for, when we prioritize those things, the work stuff elevates far beyond what our capacity could be if we don't prioritize those first.
Absolutely. And you, right here, I have a good friend, Tammy. She runs a channel called On the Level Leadership. She says 100% agree. As a former ER nurse, no one talks about their jobs or money on their deathbeds. They just don't.
Yeah.
And that she is somebody that absolutely, she was an ER and trauma nurse, and has moved into the leadership space herself. And so I think that's uh, edification, adds a lot of validity to what we're talking about. I want to take a step back for just a second, because I always like a question similar to this. And your comment, which was unique, because a lot of times I'll say, well, hey, what are some leadership traits and so forth. But one of the things that you said was, hey, I'm a culmination of like these 5 different awesome leaders. From those 5 leaders, what are some traits, or what are some characteristics maybe that you pulled from them? You said, yep, that's it, I want to do that and I want to learn it better. Can you I'm a big fan of lists, because then people can take notes and write stuff down. So of those 5 people, even 3 to 5 things, what would you name off?
I think number one, they actually cared about me as a person first. We get so caught up in making sure we're meeting KPIs and metrics, because let's be real, that's like senior level management in companies, that's what they need to drive is the results. But we get
Right.
so caught up in creating the results that we forget about the people. But the people are what gets you the results. So number one, they cared about me as a human being. Number two, they created an environment at work that I wanted to be part of. They created a team environment where everybody wins because the team's winning. And I took the same mentality in a corporate America. I mean, there were times we didn't have people taking promotions to other departments because they wanted to stay in the culture that we
That's
built.
awesome.
And we did that because we removed roadblocks, created that environment they wanted to be at work in, that family type, we're going to put
Sure.
their environment. I gave them a voice, just like my leaders. They gave me a voice. If there was a problem that I saw, don't come to them with the problem. Come to them with the solution that I think we need to try. And then they gave me the autonomy to actually try it. Or if they knew that there was a gap in my knowledge, they would educate me on the gap and then let me create the solution based upon the newfound knowledge that they just gave me, plus what I already knew. Then I felt very empowered that I was helping lead the team, even if I was leading out versus necessarily up. And when you
Sure.
create an environment where people have the solution-oriented approach and they know that they can be part of that solution, and then you use those same people to go roll it out to all of their peers, which gets you buy-in like no leader can get, because they're on the ground floor doing the hard work with their peers. Then the change management happens. Then it seems seamless. People's feet don't get stuck in quicksand. They don't lack the mental agility to get on board. Then you really create a very high performing winning team. So care about you, create that team environment, empower me to make decisions. And the last thing I would say is they help me reach my potential by pushing me hard. They cared, but they weren't easy on me. And by pushing me hard, I always was able to climb to that next ladder, which created more income for my family, which changed my legacy of where I was headed from where I started from in life, which was growing up on the street and a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse. And they just really did that in a way where I became the best version of me, the most powerful version of me. And by doing so, they prepared me for those next levels that I started to attain.
That is, those are excellent. I always just take notes, so sometimes my brain is on the leg, right? But here's some of the things that I find so interesting is when you're sharing that, well, none of those things are like, well, a leader has to be this, right? These are all more characteristics of, hey, they actually, because there is no replacement for genuine caring.
Right.
There's no replacement. People know if you are full of crap. And so when you're in a situation like that, and just to recap for anybody that may be taking notes, that was the most valuable thing. You said, hey, they cared about me as a person. They actually genuinely cared. Yeah. And then you said they created that team environment. They gave you a voice and autonomy. The fourth one I think is really strong too, with that they helped push you. Yeah. It's just like having a personal trainer at the gym, right? Mm-hmm. Those, the best leaders are the ones that are like, hey, you got one more rep in you. You got two more reps in you. You got to push. And they're the ones that can see that one extra rep. They're the ones that can see that one little tidbit of potential when you feel completely exhausted.
Yes.
And I think that is.
And you know how you do that, Mike? You don't wait to push somebody and that's all you do is push them. People need to know what they're doing well. There's so many leaders. I especially saw this in corporate America. They're leaving their people to guess whether or not they're doing the right things. So for me, it's always been the Pareto principle. And that's kind of how, and they never framed it that way, but my other leaders, that's how they've kind of led me. 80% of the time, they told me what I was doing well, exactly what I was doing well. Not, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Like, I don't have any feedback for you. They would tell me, hey, the way that you just gave that intelligence presentation to the admiral, when you said this, that's the kind of thing that's going to elevate your career. Keep doing that. They would give me specific examples of what I was doing that they wanted me to continue. Separate to that, if there's a time for, and I hate the word feedback, like just have a conversation with people. If you actually care about them and they feel that you care about them, it's going to be a conversation about pushing them to be the best version of who they are. 20% of the time, and I took the same thing into corporate America and we just crushed it there because of it. I'm not sandwiching in a compliment. I'm not telling you you're great. If we have a conversation, and you're not going to guess on whether or not you're hitting the mark, but if we have a conversation about some areas of opportunity, not failures, not feedback, they're opportunities for you to improve who you are as a leader, as a human being, as a parent, whatever that feedback is that I'm giving them in that conversation in the moment.
Sure.
And you just talk about that. And I'll give you an example. I had a manager who was pressing for senior manager. She had been a manager for 6 years. And I get to this company. This is my last company. I get to this company and we give her some opportunities to show that she's kind of ready to step up and take that senior manager role. Like, can you lead out? Can you lead up? What I found was I had to keep going back and getting the projects that I had her working on. I had to keep going back and getting an update on it. And she was just really missing, and she was missing timelines, and she wasn't coming back and saying, hey, I'm struggling with the timeline. Here's what I'm doing about it. Here's when I think I'm going to get the result. Here's what I feel like the result's going to be. Or, hey, sure, I'm just kind of stuck at this point. I'm not sure where to go. Here's what I've done so far. Can you help me understand what next steps maybe I should take? So the conversation I had with her, because 80%, she was great in so many other areas. I told her what she was great at. So she kept doing it. She came into my office that day. I said, hey, sit down, let's have a talk about some stuff. And I said, I know you're pressing for the next level. I told you you would never have to guess where you stood with me. That's one of my number one.
I use that.
Yeah. Like, and even when people got bad evaluations, they'd be mad at themselves, not at me. Cause they're like, you told me, Walt, I wouldn't have to guess. And I knew this was going to be the result coming in here. And I told her, I said, you want to be a senior manager, it's pathway to directors. So I'm thinking about the other people that are already directors that I'm leading, or the people moving into those spots or that want to. I said, but you've got a real gap in your capability to finish projects timely or understand what the output of the project needs to be. And I'm unsure what that gap looks, why. So let's sit and talk about it. So we had this great conversation, and she told me, she goes, you're the first person in 6 years of me being here that's actually told me what I needed to do. And I said, I'm going to give you some opportunities. Here's what I need to see from you. And I told her, gave her a list of things that I needed to see. So I gave her some opportunities. Next 5 projects, she smashed them, crushed them. I never had to go back and get an update. She was confused about something. She came and asked for clarification. She led out amongst her peers. She led up to me. And it was just this beautiful rhythm of what we're doing. 5 projects in a row, she crushed them, just crushed them. And her confidence grew at the same time, because what did I do? I said, see, that's what I'm talking about. When you just did this, that's what I wanted to see. Keep doing that. And I kept reemphasizing the parts where she was hitting home runs. 6 months later, well, maybe about 8 months later, we promoted her to senior manager. Nice. And she was so thankful, but she was prepared to go out of the starting block of that promotion opportunity. Her peers saw her as deserving, so it made the promotion easy amongst her peers.
Sure.
And then she got out of the starting block and started running. She didn't stumble or fall down coming out, because I didn't prepare her as a leader by giving her poignant, real feedback and having real conversations about where she needed to go to maximize her potential. That's what my leaders did for me. And that's what I ended up doing as an example in corporate America with the people that I was leading. They loved it. They said, they would tell me, Walt, you're tough, man. You are tough, but we know you really care about us. And I'm so much better with you being my leader. They love that tough love that I would give them in the moment. And they love just knowing when they were hitting the mark. There was no guessing game. And that's what we got to do as leaders, to stop allowing people to guess, because we're giving them cupcake feedback. You're doing good, Johnny. Keep doing a great job. It's lazy leadership. It's a lazy leadership. And you definitely don't show them that you care about them when you're doing it.
Well, and I think it similarly, like when you were talking about families and stuff earlier, most people, you want to see your kids successful. It's the same thing. You want to see your employees successful, right? It's more than just a, hey, a high five or a pat them on the popo and let them go, right? It's important to, Tammy said it, you've said it, that specificity is the difference in changing somebody's life. And that goes from corporate America, like you're saying, to your family. We go back a step, right? Yourself and home and so forth. And a couple of things that I feel that we run into is we'll tell people, good job. And it's that, as leaders, right? It's that surface good job. And then what happens is, so often, and I see many, many leaders do this. I know you're going to agree with me on this just based on our conversation. You have many leaders that, instead of giving the direct feedback to the people that report to them, because it's uncomfortable, right? It is uncomfortable. Let's be honest. It's not something that, as a leader, most people enjoy doing. Like, hey, we have to have this serious conversation. On one side, it's a screw up. This isn't being achieved. But if you do it, like you said, with your staff member there, then there's so much other opportunity. But instead of giving that direct feedback to them, oftentimes we fire laterally or we fire up, and we go complain to somebody else that doesn't even affect.
Yes.
And you go, oh my gosh, I've got this staff member and it's yada, yada, yada. And you've got all these complaints. Well, how is that individual ever supposed to make a change? How are they supposed to capture what it is that they need to do to make a comeback, or, move to that next level into senior management, or any management for that matter? And in our minds, I think in leadership, many leaders, and you watching or listening to the show could be doing this. You're thinking to yourself, well, I said something. Yeah, you did say something to the wrong person. It's not the person that needs to hear it.
Well, even if you said something to the person that needs to hear it, did they receive what you said? And are you self-aware enough to know that they didn't, by their actions, and then be able to loop back and say, hey, I think there's a little disconnect in the conversation that we had. Let's sit down and let's talk about that again. And I want to give you an example of this real quick, Mike, because I think that
yeah.
So when I first got out of the military and I went into corporate America, so I I managed the Navy's global operations for the Navy's HUMIT program right before I retired. And we had to, so I took a couple steps back to go into corporate America because I didn't have the hard skills. I had all the soft skills that you needed from a leadership perspective, but not the hard skills, the data analytic, corporate America, KPI metric skill stuff.
Okay.
But I'm in this company, and it's all the assistant directors and above, all the way up to the president of the company. This was a private company that I worked for. And there's probably 30 of us, 40 of us in there. And we're talking about people that just aren't doing well. And the way that we were talking about, it's like you said, where you're kind of complaining. And I'm like, so as leaders, we're supposed to be solution oriented, but all we're doing is bitching and complaining about some of the people that we have that are struggling in their roles. And I believe in right person, right time, right place, right role every single time. So if they're struggling in that, it doesn't mean you just punt them. It just means maybe they're not in the right role. So let's talk about that before we talk about somebody getting fired. So in the middle of this meeting, I said, hey, can I just say something, you guys? I said, maybe I'm the new guy, right? This is my way to disarm.
Military, that's the FNG, right?
Say, right? Maybe I'm just the new guy and I don't get it. And I said, but what I see is a major lack of leadership in this room and a lack of accountability for our ability to help these people become the best version of who they're supposed to be in their role. All I hear is their deficiencies and not what we're doing about it as leaders to bridge the gap in their deficiency to make them better at what they do. Maybe empower one of their peers to do some training with them to make them better. And I was like, so where is the accountability for the leadership team in here? And I just couldn't help it. And I'm okay. I'm never going to sacrifice my integrity or lack the moral courage to say what I need to say in the moment. And I knew that could get me pushed out the door. But I also knew the president of one of the other business units told me, we brought you in to rock the boat, rock it. And I said, as long as you make sure I don't get rocked out and drowned, I do need income to support my family. And the president of that business unit that we were in that meeting for, he sat back and he goes, you know what, Walt? He goes, you're right. You're right. So why don't we start talking about what we're going to do to help these people become better at their roles so that we can start to limit attrition like what Walt's talking about. It was such a dynamic change in that. And by the way, I got some dirty looks in there too. But what it did is it started to slowly plant the seed to change the culture from we're going to put our hands back and have alligator arms from a leadership perspective and blame it on the people who aren't good at their roles, not on the lack of leadership that needs to really train and develop our workforce to optimize their performance. And it was a dynamic shift and change to what we were doing, but it was so cool to be able to do that. And I think there's so many people striving for the next promotion. They don't have the moral integrity or the courage to stand up and call BS when they see it.
Right. No, I think man, you and I are so much on the same. I know sometimes you should have a podcast where it's like, well, hey, Walt, let me push back on you just a little bit, but I'm just like, yeah, you're right. You got it. Nailed it. Right. There's a few things, and I just would like to sort of dovetail and add on to what you're saying, like right person. We always say right person, right seat, right? If it's the right person or the right seat. And then a long time ago in the car business, we use this, the 3 T's when you're dealing with an employee. I don't know if you've ever heard this. You said, look, if you have an employee that is either not the right person or not in the right seat, you have to execute on the 3 T's. You either train them, you transfer them, or you terminate them. But you can't allow them to sit and fester in the same position that they're in and just think they're doing an okay job, or you think they're not doing an okay job. Like, there has to be some sort of action to take place so that you can get some momentum for them, the business, and for yourself as a leader. And so I always have remembered that for many, many years. Train them, transfer them, terminate them. Like, you have to make a decision. You can't just allow them to sit in the same place.
And the thing is, I can't teach you heart and hustle. You're going to have the work ethic or you're not. But what I can teach you is whatever skill you need to learn to be great at your role. For instance, we had one young woman who she hung up on one of our clients, and it was B2B client servicing role. And I knew she did, but we couldn't prove it. So I went in there with the manager to have this conversation with this young woman. And we found other times when, can I speak to a manager and the phone drops and goes dead on accident? Oops. And I asked her, I said, you used to be really great at your role. My understanding is since I've been here, your performance has been really poor. So is your attitude. And if you can't get a better attitude, then we're going to have to talk about whether or not you're a good fit for us, period. But help me understand what's happened from this excitement you had when you got here to this just cancerous kind of attitude you have now. This is how I'm talking to her, because the manager, I had to kind of step in because I'm teaching her how to have these conversations, and she was kind of getting escalated in there because they were going back and forth.
Sure.
She said, you know what? She goes, I've had 4 managers in the last year. She goes, well, you've only been here like 5 months. And so you and my manager now, you guys, I love you. You guys are amazing. I love you guys. But I feel like I'm just been thrown away, like nobody cares. And I'm like, well, that sucks. And I said, and I can't speak for how things were before, but what I can do is I can speak for how things are going to go forward. And so I always put my hand out and I was like, let's make an agreement. And they shake my hand and I'll hold their hand there. And I'm like, what do you need from me? I need you guys to keep doing what you're doing. I need this. I need this. So she rattles off like 5 things. I was like, fair. I will give you that commitment. Matter of fact, I'll give it to you so far, not only to tell your manager, if you feel like I'm not meeting that commitment and I'm not available on the things that you're asking me for, you have permission to walk in my office and say, Walt, we had a conversation and you're not meeting your commitment to me. And she gets all excited because nobody's ever talked to her like that. And I'm still holding her hand. And I was like, what are you going to give me in return? She talks about cleaning her attitude up, getting great results, just making sure this never happens again. And this went from a tense conversation where I told her, I was like, I think you're lying about hanging up on the customer. I just can't prove it. And really, I want to fire you and walk you out your door because your attitude sucks.
That is tense.
To this moment, she starts crying. She tells me what she's willing to commit. And I said, when you walk out this door, it's fist bumps and high fives and doing what we do and having a good time here at work. And this is can be a road bump for you or a speed bump for you that you talk to somebody else as you help develop somebody later in your career, or it can be the beginning of the end. But the choice is yours when you walk out of here, because I'm going to hold you to your commitment just like I expect you to hold me to mine. Fair? She's like, I'm in. I'm like, okay. Finished shaking her hand. And we finished our conversation and she went back. 11 months later, she wrote me a letter. We had just promoted her to the next level. She wrote me a letter and she talked about how meaningful that conversation was for her and how she needed that to redirect not only her life at work, but redirect her life at home, because things were struggling there too, and have some personal accountability for how she was contributing to that. And it's so beautiful. You have these moments in your career and you look back on them, and there's some moments I start to get emotional about, because it's the impact. It's being one of 3 leaders, bro. It's like you're the leader who everybody thinks is an a-hole and can't wait till they leave. You're the leader that people forget about. Like, I worked for this dude one time. I can't remember his name. Or you're the leader that's going to personally affect their life today, a year from now, 5 years from now, and a decade from now by the way you're leading them in the present. I always strive to be the 3rd leader, where I'm affecting their family life, where they're at in their career a decade from now, where they're like those leaders were for me, where I'm still using the tools they gave me. Do I always hit a home run in that department? I'm sure some people would say no, and I would tell you the same, but I strive to be that. So what kind of a leader are you striving to be like? The a-hole, the forgettable one, or the one that really affects people's lives far beyond the place of work a decade from now? And are you being that, whether you ever learn about it or not? I've just been blessed that people have looked me up years later and they've told me things that lets me know that I've been in the right space mentally for that. But my heart's always right there. And that's what we need to develop on leadership, is your heart needs to be where you understand the value of your people. And more importantly, you understand the impact your leadership is going to have on them long after you're gone.
Dude, that's so good. I applaud you for that, because I think I was having a conversation with it's actually a group that Tammy, who was here a few minutes ago, is in with me. We're in a leadership sort of mastermind group. And one of the conversations we were having is, there's one particular gentleman, and he says, man, I have people reach out to me that I led before and are telling me, like what you're saying, the amount of impact. And as you're putting it into those terms, like you can be the a-hole, you can be the forgettable one, or you can be the person that makes, real impact and change. I think there's only one of those that you can strive to be. Because you're saying, and not to put words in your mouth, like if you're striving to be a good leader, it's always chasing after the one that's making an impact, making a difference, making a change, making connection, building relationships. That's the person that strives. The forgettable one, those are the people that are just showing up because it's the job and the title.
Lazy. Yep.
The a-hole, yeah. So you have the a-hole's the entitlement leader. The forgettable one's the lazy leader, and the impact and change driven one, that's the actual leader. So anytime you're striving to be better tomorrow than you were today, anytime you're striving to learn something from an employee this hour that you didn't know an hour ago about them, that's the right leader. And I pulled two other things out. I always have to take notes, and I put them in the sidebar and such, so I can go back, because even prior to this moment, because you just got going on a roll, man. One of the things we were even talking about, if you're in a leadership or management role in a company, and this reminds me of maybe one of those things that even I'd forgotten, it's important to hire people for heart and intelligence. When you're bringing people on, like you were saying about this young lady in the call center, hire people for their heart, hire people for their intelligence. But then it's your responsibility, it's your duty to train them for skills. Because if you hired them, what's that?
You should want to do that. You should want
Absolutely.
to train to be the best, because then everybody wins if you're doing that.
Well, and really train them. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, to have some autonomy, to make their own mistakes, to be able to own that position themselves, train them for the skills, and then let them own it. And so often, if you hired them for heart and intelligence, one of the things, you'll lose people, you will lose your leadership credibility if you hire them for their heart and intelligence and then you don't train them. You know, what does it cost the company to just say, well, hey, here's the manual, go read that and get on the phone, or go read that and go sell widgets, or go read that and go fix this car, or whatever it may be. You lose credibility, not just with that individual, but with the other people, because they saw that person that you brought on, the caliber of that person. The other thing that I thought was so powerful, just to recap from this last few minutes, is when you said, hey, I grab their hand and I hold on to it, right? And I'm sitting there, and I have to imagine I'm putting myself in your shoes, like we're making that eye contact.
Oh yeah.
And it is one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader, is to manage people by agreement. The part that becomes very hard on that is when you're managing others by agreement, and you said it, you have to be willing to be managed back. You have to set those expectations and allow people. That means you as a leader, and we've said this on several shows. I've had many different people here on the Leadership Toolkit that said, you got to be vulnerable. That takes some real vulnerability to say, hey, it's okay for you as the person that works for me to hold me accountable.
That's right. That's 360 leadership. You need it.
Absolutely.
That builds trust. When you let people know they can hold you accountable too, and you really actually take the feedback on board, and that conversation they have the courage to come to you with, because it takes a lot of courage to come to your boss and say, hey, they're missing the mark, and you adjust fire and you change and you meet them, even if it's halfway, right? Because maybe everything's with a grain of salt, but maybe they opened you up to a blind spot you didn't even know that you had. And you're going to become a better leader because of feedback somebody on one of your teams gave you.
Well, that takes guts. It takes guts for somebody to come and say that to a leadership role. I want to backtrack all the way to the beginning of the conversation for a second too, because when you were talking about the culmination, and again, there's so many different directions we could go. We could sit here all afternoon. It's great. But when you're saying, hey, I had these sort of this culmination of 5 leaders, and you brought up some things that were great traits to have, and you've shared some awesome wisdom and some real experiences with those. Did those leaders that you really looked up to, weren't there some things that there were shortcomings also that you said to yourself, man, I'm never going to do that?
Oh yeah. I mean, not from them necessarily, although, there might've been things that I tweaked and adjusted based upon all 5 of them, but definitely from look, in the military, every year, 2 or 3 years, you're moving, but while you're at a command, everybody on your teams are moving. Your teams are coming in and out that you're leading. So you're always evolving as a leader there and getting buy-in, but so is your leader. And so you're always getting buy-in and earning trust of that new leader. the cool thing about my career is I probably had, no joke, like 40 to 50 leaders over a 25-year career, which has helped me immensely and build this portfolio of skills that I can leverage and lean on based upon my experiences with all these people. And those leaders that weren't great leaders, that were micromanagers, that were just, they were the a-holes, right? They were the yellers. They were the ones that took credit for somebody else's work. They were the ones that came in, and if things went wrong, they blamed it on somebody else. If things went right, they took the credit for it. And it should be opposite, right? It should be, if things go right, man, that's my team. Like, let me tell you about the manager who did this, the associate who did this, the director who did. Let me tell you about the person who really went to bat for this right now, especially if you could do it in front of that person to your boss.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things really taught me what not to be. So although I don't use those tools in my skill set, they taught me what tools not to use, because I always remembered how I felt when those things happened to me, or when I saw them happen to somebody else. And that's the thing I hear a lot of, and I heard this in corporate America for some leaders, and it used to really piss me off and grind my gears. They wouldn't give that positive feedback as much. Well, I didn't get it. So like I said, I will never lack the courage to say what I feel like I need to say in the moment.
I turned out fine.
What I would say is, yeah, and how's that working for you? And I was like, the problem is you're missing the opportunity to elevate yourself as a leader by not adjusting because you were led a certain way. So if a child gets beat, they should beat their kid, because I went through a lot of abuse. So this is what I said to a leader of mine. So if a child gets beat, they should beat their family. Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. Well, that is what you said. We're just using a different example now that seems a lot more drastic in the moment. And I said, you have the opportunity to be exceptional at what you do, but you're so caught up and worried about yourself and stealing credit for everybody, for that other people's work, to make yourself look good because you're driven by the promotion, not realizing if you gave credit for your team, you gave credit to the people doing the work, you're going to look phenomenal as a boss, and those people are going to run through a wall for you. It's such a gap in your mentality on leadership. They didn't like that, and that's probably why I didn't get promoted any further there, but
hey, it's truth. And you brought up something too, because you were saying, and not that we'll dive into this on this episode, but one of the things that put you where you are, we were talking before the show, like that we have those God moments. It may not be where we think we need to be, but God says, no, hey, this is exactly where you need to be. And one of the things that helped you, you just brought up childhood trauma. Hey, if you were beat as a kid, you should be beat. For anybody who is listening, Walt has an amazing book. It's his true story. Would you call it a memoir? Is that?
It's definitely
fair?
a memoir called Monsters in My House, a True Story. This is the cover. I always keep it close when I'm on a podcast. That's you as a little boy being thrown in the basement in the dark with the terrifying mask. But those moments don't define me. What those moments did, as I did the healing work, this is why I wear a warrior. I'm not a victim. I'm not a survivor. I'm a warrior. Like, I'm certified from the things that I went through, because I've learned how to use them as power and feel empowered from those experiences. God trusted me with the things I went through and the horrific trauma that I went through, so that I can reach those people that feel unreachable, that feel like nobody would understand, and help them see they don't have to use those experiences and allow those experiences to drown them, but they can start using those experiences as rocket fuel for everything they do in their life. They can use those experiences and unlock these superpowers that we all have during the healing process of empathy and grit and resilience and compassion and love. Like, these things, and created the person that I am today, are because of my experiences. And if you take any one of those away, I can't go do the things that I do in the way that I do them and have the success that I've had. So I'm actually thankful for all those experiences. But I mean, if you would have told me I would be thankful for being locked in basements in the dark and the massive trauma that I endured as a kid, we probably would have fought,
Right.
As a 47-year-old man who's done a lot of work, there's a freedom that I denied myself for a lot of years, because I was driven by hate and spite, and I'm not going to let them control me now, and I'm not going to let them ruin my life. And there's a lot of people that struggle with addiction and struggle with many different things in their marriages and their relationships at work now, because they haven't done the inner healing that we all need to do, because they're afraid that they're going to bring traumatic experiences up and they don't believe on the other side of that dark tunnel that they walk into, there's light and abundance and success and just a freedom that I want people to really feel. So I get really jacked up about this topic because I know
I
what it's
love
like
it.
to walk in that darkness and feel alone, like nobody understands, feel like I don't know what's going to happen. Am I really going to be able to work through these? And then realizing how my story has helped save other people's lives, but more importantly, how my story and the talks that I've given on this, on doing the inner work, how that has enabled people to feel empowered, own their warrior power, and go out and share their story with the person that needed to hear theirs, that don't need to hear mine. They're out saving somebody else's life because that person who they just talked to needed their story. So God put them in the place to go share their story with them. And when you can create a world where people start to feel empowered by those stories instead of drowned by them, you eliminate trauma. And more importantly, you create a healthy world that understands the superpowers that comes with what we feel like are negative experiences in the moment.
Man, that is super powerful. We like I said, we could spend a whole afternoon on that. One interesting thing you bring up, and you're probably the second or third person recently when you're talking about, we get into these conversations about, leadership and business and corporate America and your background in the military. And then we kind of get to this point and there's this turning point and you say, look, there was this trauma and this stuff that I had to overcome. And that's what actually elevated me. And one of the things you brought up is, okay, well, you got to do the inner work. And I'm going to ask a question on this just real quickly, kind of as we're coming down to the tail end, because I think this is incredibly important for people that are in leadership roles. What does it mean to do the inner work? And this could take up a whole hour on its own, but in a nutshell, what does it mean when you're saying, hey, you got to do the inner work? And if somebody is experiencing difficulty right now, whether it's in business, in their family, in their self, in their own head,
Yeah.
where would you advise them to start? And what does that mean?
I think the first thing is a choice. If you know that you're struggling with something, you've got the self-awareness locked down, right? It's not a blind spot. You know it's an issue. The next thing is a choice you make to choose your hard. You're going to choose your heart either way. It's hard to work through those experiences that are drowning you on a day-to-day purpose, the things that make you feel like you're never going to be happy or you're not deserving of success or whatever those things look like. It's going to be hard to work through those. But the reason I talk about it the way that I do is because I want people to believe on the other side of that is real power and abundance and success and happiness that you're denying yourself from. It's freedom like nothing else will give you. Or you're going to shy away from going and doing that work, and you're going to continue to live a life feeling like you're drowning and feeling like you're never going to have the internal freedom. There's always going to be this internal chaos and tussle that you're in with yourself. Choose your heart. Once you choose your heart, you can ask yourself the what if question. Hey, what if I really go down the path of working through this? Society teaches us to say what if every decision we make. I don't care what it is. We ask what if, we think of the negative ramifications of whatever that is.
What if it doesn't work?
What if you just took the lens on everything you do in your life and you said, what if I try for this new job and it's everything I wanted to be and it's the best bosses ever? What if this trauma I'm hanging on to where I just can't find this happiness inside anymore, or every relationship I have, I sabotage because I just don't feel worthy of love? What if I go seek counseling? What if I speak my truth and I start to talk about these things that are just laying right underneath my chest? What if that is literally the key to living a life maxed out and feeling like I'm finally free inside? What if? And when you start to say, damn, what if? And you think of these things that can happen because of it, two things happen. You take action, you get results, and then you gain belief. As you take action, get results, and gain belief, you teach yourself the next action I take is going to get results, is going to increase my belief. And it's this beautiful cycle. That's what I mean by adding rocket fuel to your life. That's what that does for you. And if you're struggling with something and you know you're struggling, speak your truth, man. The biggest flex of strength in life is being vulnerable, because on the other side of that vulnerability is a freedom you're denying yourself of, is emotion that you need to let go, that will cause you to lash out at coworkers, that will cause you to take things personally, that will cause you to lash out at your spouse, at your kids, that will keep you just in this place where you wake up angry and you can't be happy. when you start to move in the other direction and you start to speak your truth, and I didn't tell my deepest, darkest secret from my childhood the first time I spoke my truth. It was just one little
Sure.
piece. And I realized I feel better saying that. And then it was like the next, it's like an onion, man. You got to peel the whole onion one piece at a time. And then next thing you know, you get to this point because you chose your heart, you asked what if, and you continue down this path, believing there's abundance and success on the other side. You continue to work down that path. You speak more truths. You start to just accept the realities and where your struggles are at for what they are. You acknowledge the emotions. You start to work through those. You find forgiveness for yourself, maybe. You find forgiveness for those people who hurt you, not so the people who hurt you can feel good. Doesn't condone
Right.
what they did. You find forgiveness so that you can let go of the things that are sitting on your chest, so that you can let go of the anger, just like I had to do. And then once you find that forgiveness, you start to unlock these different superpowers along the way of this journey that you're on. And when you do that, bro, I'm telling you, like, I live this, man. I live this, which is why I wrote the book. I didn't write it for myself. I wrote it to give people the belief that they're one choice away, just like I was, from changing the entire direction of their life. And if they do that, their marriage, the way they show up as a parent, the way they show up as a leader, the way they show up as a friend, the way that they just show up in life and what life gives them, because they get out of this negative victim headspace and they get in their warrior
Mhm.
mentality, the what life brings to them, because their energy is different that they're just giving off, will be everything that they dreamt it could be.
I love it when you get going on stuff because there's just so much insight and wisdom in what it is that you share. Yeah, I'm going to throw this out there. Your next book needs to be building a superhero, right? And you need to list on all the things on what you're doing, or building a warrior, right? Um, so we're here. We're just about at the hour mark, and I what I will tell you, I would love to have you back on the show another time later because we could continue this conversation. I think it's fantastic. Any final thoughts as we're coming to the tail end here, Walt?
I just think, look, guys, if you're out there and you're struggling, it's the holiday season right now for the people who are going to see this. There's a lot of people out there struggling. Just know that better days are ahead. You are literally, I'm a testament to going from being driven by hatred and anger to being driven by love when I started my family and I had my daughter, and what love can do for you and the way you love yourself and the way you love others. Start asking yourself the what if questions. Don't wait till the new year. Do it right now. Ask yourself what the what if questions that you're struggling with the most and write down all the things that can go right. And
All
then
the things that can go
run
right.
straight forward into the thing that scares the hell out of you. Run straight into it, because you're going to create a win and you're going to show yourself that, one, I can do it. Two, that felt really good. And three, look at the outcome when I actually had the courage to run straight through the thing that scares the hell out of me. And when you do that, everything else will start to follow. And I promise you, it becomes easier every single time you do it, because your belief meter will be off the charts.
So good. Thank you for that. And then a couple of quick reminders for everybody that's tuning in. First off, Walt, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing, the leadership insight that you have, and the from both military and corporate America, and then getting into some of this personal inner work. And I can tell, like, that energy and that passion just it shows everywhere around you. And so it's awesome. I'm genuinely so appreciative to have you on the show today. For everybody also that has tuned in, I'm going to throw it up here one more time. Make sure you can check out Walt. And you said Stephanie, is that right?
Yep. And what's cool about the podcast, guys, if you're
Mhm.
wondering if you should listen to it, we always recommend listening to it with your partner, but you get the feminine and the masculine view on these perspectives. And sometimes we need to hear from the other sex. And sometimes we need to hear the version of what we should be thinking about communication and intimacy and all the things that we talk about on our podcast. So, but because I know you're going to wrap up, I just want to say
Sure.
thank you, by the way, for having me on, for trusting me with your audience, and
Absolutely.
for just continuing to help build the next generation of leaders and to maximize the capability of the leaders that we have right now. There could not be enough people doing what you're doing. And it's such a blessing to be on and share a little bit of knowledge and wisdom, but more importantly, just to partner with somebody like you that's out here doing God's work. That's for sure.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and take that. Thank you. Like from the bottom of my heart, I'm going to go ahead and take us out here. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the close of another Leadership Toolkit. I encourage you, do me a favor. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe, throw some thumbs up, throw some likes on the show here. Most importantly, if you got something out of the show, and I know you did, I absolutely know you did, share this with someone else that needs to hear the message, because we talk with all of these awesome people from different verticals of business and military backgrounds and collegiate backgrounds and all of these different places that have unique experiences. And I know that they connect with you on some level. And sometimes you'll listen and you go, man, that's something I don't want to do. And that's okay. That's how you have to be able to build and define yourself as well. But please share the show. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really value your time. And we always want to put out something that is of quality and has a good message in it. And so I hope you gained that today. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until we speak next, be great. We'll talk soon.